And here we are with another edition of Saturday with Seniors. Kevin Thomas, your host here, and I am with Helen Conklin. She's 102 years old, and I'm in Painted Post. And tell me where we're at, Helen.
Brookdale.
How do you enjoy living here?
I often said I couldn't have found a better place.
Well, great.
It is a better place, and the food is good. And
I'm so happy to hear that you have a place that you're happy that you're living and they're taking well care of you. My parents are getting older too, and I hope that they have a facility like this to take care of them too as well.
Well, I started going to church. My neighbor took me because I was 5 years old, and she was a Sunday school teacher. And I've never stopped going except this period I'm in that I gave up my car because my age, I felt I shouldn't be on the road.
You probably made a responsible decision, and they got everything they need for you here. And it sounds like religion's an important part of your life because that was 97 years ago that you were 5 years old. How old are you now?
102.
So you were born in 1920? And where were you born?
In Tioga.
Right in downtown?
A mile outside the road to Wellsboro, but it was, I think, around 20-some miles to Wellsboro. But
the miles were a lot longer then, right? Wellsboro was not just a 20-minute drive down the street when you were a kid.
Yeah. Anyway, we walked to school, and it was a mile.
You walked to school right from the beginning, when you were in first grade, you would walk to school a mile.
Oh, I couldn't wait to go to school.
That's great.
I knew my ABCs. And
So where was the school that you went to? Was it in town or in Tioga?
You go right from my house to the center, and then you go down a couple
streets down is where it was. So was it a big school then or a one-room schoolhouse?
No, it wasn't a big one, but they had just put in a bigger room. I, at that time, could play some waltzes and things after we had our lunch, and we could dance, and I would play for the dancing, and I regret that I gave up the piano. I really
enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Music was an important part of your life. What else do you remember about school? Was there an inkwell for your pens, or did you dip your pens to write in school? And did the teacher still have a chalkboard?
Yeah, we got a new tablet.
When you say tablet, do you mean a paper tablet or a slate tablet?
Paper.
Yeah.
And we had to be very careful with our pencils, because we only got a pencil once a month.
What happened if you ran out of your pencil before a month? For the kids who weren't careful.
I don't remember that.
You were just always careful with your pencil.
Yeah.
So times were tough then. There wasn't as much money going around. It was the Great Depression when you were growing up.
It was hard. Very hard.
Calvin Coolidge was president when you were a kid. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you remember if your parents voted for Calvin Coolidge? Did your parents talk about politics much?
No. My mother was housekeeper and wife. And as I said, my grandmother had 13 children.
Your grandmother had 13 children. Wow. Was your grandma a new resident to the United States, or was she born here? We're going way back in time.
I think she was maybe born here or on the way across from Germany.
Wow. Do you know what she did for work, or do you know anything about her history? Did you ever study what your grandma did? I'm sure she had her hands full of 13 kids. It would be 5 jobs in itself.
My mother was a housekeeper for quite a while for a school teacher. And that teacher lived in a very nice home. And she had a parrot, and she would talk to her. And
the parrot would talk back to her.
Yes.
What did your dad do for work when you were younger?
My dad was a New York Central engineer.
Drove the train.
On the train.
Do you know how your parents met?
Yes, I had an aunt, I guess it was, and she was a cook. And her uncle owned a little restaurant for the railroaders.
Uh-huh.
And one time when they went down to see her, her uncle hired her to stay and work in the restaurant.
And that's where they met?
Yeah.
In the restaurant?
And he liked poached eggs for breakfast. But it was funny because she said, I'll do the best I can, but they didn't suit him. So he said, well, I'll poach my own eggs.
Tell me about some of the things you remember when you were a kid.
After I got older, they used to tell me that the day I was born, there were 3 other births for that same doctor, and he had to hurry from one to the other.
You were born inside that house? Did the doctor come to the house to deliver you?
Oh, yes. They didn't have hospitals then.
So when you were young, if you needed to see the doctor, he would come to your house to see you. He made a house call. Because that's very different now, obviously.
Yes, and the neighbors all said the Rowleys, my maiden name, the Rowleys are never going to raise that girl. She's always sick or hurt. And one day we had a steep hill beside our house. When you got to the bottom, that was the garden. So in the fall, when the food was all gathered, my dad would smooth it all out so you can start up there and zoom. So the friends and, well, some that weren't friends, they were welcome anyway because they liked that hill.
Was that for sledding or for a bicycle, or what did you ride down the hill?
Sometimes back then, their parents would take lumber and, just make...
For the snow, a toboggan?
Yeah.
Hey, you made a lot of stuff back then. Did your parents make your clothing for you when you were a kid? Or did you buy your clothing in a store?
No, my mother was a seamstress, but the lady that lived next, Mrs. Benson, she was a seamstress.
Mm-hmm. So she made your clothing for you, or did you buy your clothing at a store?
She taught my mother, and then my mother had a magazine or something. She got an idea they had sent for the catalog, and they were all little snatches of material.
Patches to make a quilt?
No, patches to sell.
So people would do whatever they had to do to make money then?
Yeah.
How many pairs of shoes did you have when you were a kid? 2 pairs? 3 pairs? Do you remember? Your closet probably wasn't as full as today's kids' closets, I'm going to guess, from what I understand.
Well, as I got older, I loved my shoes.
Oh, okay. But when you were younger, you wore your shoes till they totally wore out. I mean, do you remember taking your shoes to the cobbler to get them fixed?
Well, my dad was kind of knowledgeable. He could put a new outer sole,
He could fix the sole on a shoe.
He'd put it over the stove. He could take a piece of leather and
cut it into something.
And somehow he got the sole to stick on the shoe, and we got along.
Yeah, it was tough during the Great Depression years. You said you got a pencil a month. Do you remember some other things?
Well, I remember our first car. I was 6 years old.
So we're talking 1926, your family had a car. That was pretty unusual then, right? A lot of people still had horses.
Oh, yes. But he had a car, and the thing I remember was...
The steering wheel.
Steering wheel, and there was a raise up in the middle, and that was the horn.
Remember, did he have to crank the car to start it?
They probably did.
So you remember going for a ride in that car as a kid?
Oh, yes. And when I was 16, I got my license.
Oh, boy. What did you have to do to get your driver's license?
We had to go to Wellsboro, and the police took us out, and we had to do different things for them, parking and backing up.
And did you pass your test the first time?
Well, that was funny. There was a young man that went to the dances. I love to dance. And he tried for his license the same day I did, and we were waiting in line for people to do it. And he said, "You might as well fall out because you won't pass the first time."
And you showed him.
Yes, he was from Blossburg, and he made a mess of it, and I passed that.
So what was your first car that you had? Did you buy a car shortly after that, or was it when you were older did you buy a car?
My dad bought a car, and it was called Star.
Star, that was the name of the car. And you shared one car, right?
Well, he did most of it, but then
Didn't share fairly, but you all shared a car.
and my mother, she was just elated when she passed her.
Her test, too.
Yeah.
So do you have any brothers and sisters?
I had one brother. He lost the use of his right leg, and he didn't live long. And he had married my best girlfriend, and she got sick not long after, and I just was brokenhearted.
That's got to be tough, yeah. So were you married?
Yes, he was about my age. And I don't know how it happened, but we were talking about smoking, and his mother says, "Well, I'll have you know that our son smoked from the time he was 14 years old." Zane was his name.
Mm-hmm. Did he eventually stop smoking, or did he smoke his whole life?
I begged him.
Not to smoke.
I begged him. And one morning, there was 4 of the young men, and they would meet down on the corner. There was a little store, and they had tables, and they would go down there, have a cup of coffee, and they would smoke. And I told him I worked at the hospital, and I said, "I know what it will do to you." One morning he came down and he had this awful cold, and it was from the smoking, and
Yep.
he only lived, I think it was a couple of days.
Oh, I'm sorry. Still hard for you, I'm sure.
I try to tell people, but they don't want to listen.
Well, maybe somebody listening right now is just thinking a little bit about it because of what you're saying.
Now, I had a brother, and he was a smoker, and another couple was with them, and they went to Florida for a week, and coming back, he was smoking. And there was a curve, he said, in the road, and it was around some cotton or something. And he took a puff and he threw it out the window, and he said, "There."
He was done.
Exactly. And he never smoked again.
So you did help somebody, I'm sure, that influence. So what are some other memories that you have as a kid?
Roller skating.
In Tioga?
Yeah, they were selling roller skates. Now, my brother didn't care for that at all. but I love those roller skates.
Was the roller skating rink in Tioga then? It was in the Grange building then, or did you go roller skating outside or somewhere else?
The green,
Where Francis Murphy had run that Grange, that same spot, roller skating when you were a kid.
yeah.
I did not realize it went back that far. That's really neat.
And then there was another one in Mansfield.
So besides roller skating in town, was there anything else that you did? Did you go to the movies ever as a kid? Do you remember any of the movies you saw as a kid?
Once in a while, the Grange Hall would put a show on.
Mm-hmm. Any other things that you remember in town? What town was like? Was it busy? Was there a day of the week that people all came shopping to Tioga?
I don't think they cared about the day when they needed groceries. They went and bought them.
Yeah.
But a lot of women in the early spring until fall, they canned.
Nowadays, some people can. Back then, almost everybody canned. That was how, but during the Great Depression, I guess that was your cheapest way to be assured that you would have food.
Yeah.
So do you remember the ladies all coming together and canning as a sort of it was a social event, right? Or
Well, no, but the church that I went to, they put on, like they do today, they put on every once in a while a supper
yeah.
and charge whatever.
Yeah, probably then it was a quarter.
Yeah.
Tell me some things that are different in the world now than they were when you were a kid. And so many things are different. You didn't have TV as a kid. Did you ride the train ever to get somewhere?
Oh,
I mean, your dad worked on the train, so I'm guessing.
So if we wanted to go from Corning to Seattle, we could. It didn't cost us anything.
What was it like riding on a train? Did you enjoy it? Was it smoky, noisy?
My brother loved it, but I got sick. So my mother spent a lot of time in the bathroom.
So the train came through Tioga until 1972. And then something big happened in Tioga about halfway through your life, and that was the flood. We're jumping forward quite a few years here. So what do you remember about the flood? Did your home get affected from the flood?
I was working then at the Rand, but I came home from work. They told us we could go home, and there were several of us.
Someone was telling me your home, you had water up to the ceiling in your house?
We did, but we went up to the water tower, and I know we stayed in our cars up there all night. And this man, he was in a boat. And he said, when I was on my way here, it got a little rough. And he said, I held on your eaves trough so it wouldn't turn the canoe.
The water was that strong and high around your house. Wow, very interesting.
It was a horrible thing.
Yeah.
But you know that night, I came home and we each had a car. When I got home, I got some clothes. I got as much food as I could put in my car.
I've seen pictures of what Tioga looked like after the flood, and it was devastated.
It was.
You've been through a lot in your life. The Great Depression, the flood in Tioga, loss of a brother, a lot of tough things in your life. And
yes. A lot of it is hard, but
you kept your faith through it all, though, right? You
I do have my faith.
Yeah, that helped you through it, I'm sure. Well, I want to thank you for your time. We're going to wrap up our interview. I appreciate it so much, you sharing all this information with us. That's Helen Conklin, 102 years old, originally from Tioga, here on Saturday with Seniors on KC 101, brought to you by FCCB's local branches in Wellsboro, Mansfield, and Blossburg, serving our community for over 150 years, member FDIC. And thank you, Helen. Thank